Hi, I'm Clara, and this is the Practice with Clara podcast, where we go into philosophy and all things yoga related, which has been my passion for the last 20 years. In today's episode, we go into the fifth chakra, the throat chakra. We go into the themes and imbalances. What is your sound? And the power of storytelling. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, and we hope you enjoy today's episode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Practice with Clara podcast. You're sitting today with Stephanie,
Clara,
and Shiv.
So we're entering the fifth week of our chakra series. This week it's the throat chakra, Vishuddha. So I thought we'd center with a reading from Wheels of Life. This has been our kind of anchor for the chakra series by Anodea Judith. The essence of all beings is earth. The essence of earth is water. The essence of water is plants. The essence of plants is man. The essence of man is speech. The essence of speech is the holy knowledge, Veda. The essence of Veda is Samaveda, word, tone, sound. The essence of Samaveda is Om.
Can you just read that last part again?
Well, it's one long sentence.
Okay.
So just read the whole
thing. The essence is Om.
The essence is Om.
Okay.
And this is from the Upanishads.
Okay.
That's paraphrased in the book.
Okay. And why did you choose this passage, Steph?
So I chose this passage because it illuminates how the sound, the vibration word is the binding element of all the elements in man. That's what I understood this passage to mean, is that the essence of what we're living in is the Om, the primordial sound that connects everything. And it's past language. Mm-hmm. It captures language, but it is beyond language.
What it makes me think of is, in terms, there's three sounds to Om, the Ah, the O, and the and the Ah being the beginning. And it is said that when babies, the first sound they make is Ah. So it's the first sound that all humans make is Ah. And that is the beginning of our own evolution as well as the evolution of the universe. And then the O represents the sustaining, or that which gives life. And then the is the dissolution or the transformation. So the Ah, O, right, represents the cycle of life. The beginning, middle, and end. And in yoga philosophy, or specifically in the Hindu pantheon, it's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the beginning, middle, and end, right? And then in the feminine aspect, right, it is Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Durga. So as we make the sound of Om, and why Om is everything is because we're always in a cycle. Right? And what's kind of fun is, depending upon where you are in your life cycle, also in your moon cycle as women, or, I feel like sometimes within a day there's a cycle or a couple of cycles. So, it's a beautiful way to kind of honor the fact that we are always in a cycle.
Yeah.
And doesn't the silence at the end of the Om, doesn't that have also a place in that whole
very much so.
Sequence too?
Yes.
That's the aha moment.
Is in the silence.
You start with ah as a baby, and if you're lucky, you get to aha.
Or when you're at my dad's age, you're ha.
Or it's pant.
So how does...
And then there's utter silence.
Oh my gosh.
No, the after silence, or the I forget what there's actually a name for the silence of it, and it's I've lost it right now. But essentially, it's like it is the pregnancy, or the pause between the cycle starting again.
So it's
right. It's almost like the quiet or the meditative part, which I think is what my dad, in terms of referring to the aha, would also be. In a humorous way, it would be that, but in a serious spiritual way, it would be the moment of
awakening.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
or
liberation,
or nirvana. Insert fun word of choice for the seeking that we do. So, how do we think that this, kind of bringing it to you guys in terms of, so the fifth chakra being the throat chakra, in Sanskrit we call that Vishuddha. And it is the place, or what sits here is how we express ourselves. So I call it the portal between the esoteric and the exoteric, meaning that which is inside or not tangible, and to that which is tangible. So it is through the portal of the throat that we share with the world what is inside, which I find so fascinating. And so yeah, I guess I'm going to leave it at that.
So it's the expression of your being in a way. Yeah.
And one of the things I thought would be interesting and kind of an activity I wanted to do to introduce both of you to our listeners is the storytelling element of it. And when you brought Shiv into the teacher training 3 years ago, we talked a lot about the mythology in the yoga practice and Joseph Campbell. So I think kind of bringing the conversation into an area where we discuss the cosmology, mythology, and all the stories within the practice and why it's important to express ourselves in that way and how we express ourselves to others. So to introduce Clara and Shiv, I'm going to ask you guys some questions.
Sure.
And if you can just share
Sure.
so the
Great.
audience can get to know you. So what is your favorite book that you're reading right now or that you've read within the last couple of months?
I read the biography of Joseph Campbell, actually, once again, because he
Probably for the 50th time.
yeah, and each time I do, I go deeper into his journey. So it's the hero's journey, and it was Joe's journey, which is when I was a young boy, when I encountered him, he helped me begin my journey.
And who is Joseph Campbell?
Joseph Campbell was a American mythologist, and his sense of mythology was the monomyth, the bringing together of these themes that are what Carl Jung would call the collective unconscious. And so what Campbell was saying is that every society has this myth that the soul, the individual, goes through. And that I found myself moving through that, and I found myself seeing that I was part of that journey, and I'm part of and that came about when I was watching a show when I was about 14 or 15 called Hollywood and Its Stars, and it had, it dealt, what attracted me was John Huston, the director, who was an actor in there, and he played this old cardinal, but it dealt with this young boy called Stephen Fermoil, and he goes to the South. And he's a priest, and he encounters the Ku Klux Klan, which is very relevant to what's going on right now. And they whip him in the forest, but they whip him in a cruciform way. And at that point, something in me skipped a beat, and I recognized that he was a Christ-like figure, and that the Christ figure, or the crucified individual, moved throughout time. And at that point, something shifted in me. Like you did the heart chakra the other day. The heart chakra is the domain within which the temporal and the eternal meet. And in the heart chakra, you're no longer restricted in space and time. So I felt when I was that age, 14 or 15, when I recognized the value of symbology, and Campbell helped me understand that even further. But that original experience that I had about symbols moving throughout time, that this motif moves throughout all time and space, and that absolutely shifted my whole understanding of what it means to be alive. And I think this deals with storytelling as well. Once upon a time, which is every time.
And you're talking about archetypes, the characters that keep, like the hero, the villain, that keep being replayed. Yeah.
Yes.
Pardon me. Yes, exactly.
Very much so. And then this connects with therapy and the therapeutic notions that Jung had about these elements, these forces that are within us, symbolized, externalized as, Shiva, Vishnu, and so on. But these are external symbols of internal processes.
Yes.
So that's how I got involved in mythology and my journey.
And so reading the Joseph Campbell's biography for the 50th time, what are you getting this time?
That's a good question. Deepening my understanding of what it means to be alive and coming towards the last cycle, which is the death cycle, which is moving back into the void, into the greater silence, into the higher silences, and so on. And how comforting that is, because others have gone before me, and what this is about. And I find myself, it was so interesting because towards the end of his life, he felt that he was a failure. And this man had done so much.
Joseph Campbell
Had done so much. And I feel that about myself. And I was saying, my God, you know. This man has done so much, and then I reflect upon myself, and I recognize that at this time somehow it doesn't seem as though you've lived a life because it's gone so quickly.
Okay.
And as a result, you don't remember what you seem to remember. The shadow comes forward more. And what I realize now, as I'm getting older, I'm 72 now, that my shadow is very strong with me, you know, and I cast a long shadow.
And so what does that look and feel like when you cast a long shadow?
There's a sense of dread, and at the same time there's a sense of excitement in a very strange way, because there's comfort in the darkness. Yeah. I want to tell you a very strange experience I had. I was in Washington in '92 at the quincentennial, the 500-year anniversary of the American Republic, and when you would say we were meditators. We sat on the steps of Washington for 42 days, from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock every day. At the end, there was an extraordinary event that occurred, because there were people who were walking from Panama, because there was the Panama incident in which the Americans invaded Panama, and there was mass graves and so on, and people were protesting that, and they had walked, and people from the West Coast, from San Francisco, native people had walked, and people from the East Coast had walked, and they'd all come together on Columbus Day, you know, September 12th, I believe it was, 500 years. And as these people came together, we were sitting on the steps, and there were about 400 or 500 people coming around to the Capitol building, and they were playing drums, and it was just an and we were playing drums on the steps, and they were playing drums on the step, and then all of a sudden we synchronized our drumming, and I went on for about an hour, it felt like it, but about a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, we were drumming together, and then out of nowhere, because it was not choreographed at all, the drumming just stopped. And there was a silence, and the silence was filled, and it was the silence of the Om, right? But what happened to me was strange. My body, my spirit or my consciousness left my body, and I became death. And I was going over and it was the Civil War, and I was this spirit, and I was coming down, and I was touching the people, and freeing them from their pain. And then I had this whole different notion of death as merciful. And so a little bit of that is creeping now into my consciousness. Death as comfort. So, and that's what mythology does. I mean, you're going back to the mother, you know?
Yeah. What's your favorite book right now?
I'm like,
that's where that started.
I know. I was like, where did we go from here? I was like, ooh, death. Okay, comfort. The book that I'm reading right now is called Make the Beast Beautiful. And
Who's that by?
Sarah Wilson.
Okay.
She's an Australian author, best known for some sort of like sugar-free diet. It's very weird. But it is a book all about anxiety.
Okay.
And she is a woman who's worked with anxiety for since she was 11 or 12 years old, and she's been in different kinds of therapy, and she's done all the types of self-help to medication to everything in between to kind of help her with anxiety. And she's been diagnosed with bipolar, and she was diagnosed with OCD and a ton of other things. And so it's not a medical book. It's a book of her experience of anxiety. And I initially saw the book because the cover is beautiful. So I just went over. It's this octopus. It's an indigo book with an
Where
octopus.
Where were you?
At Banyan Books.
Of course you were.
A beautiful bookstore, like a new age hippie bookstore here in Vancouver. And then there's like these pink bubbles that are around, like neon pink bubbles with this. It was beautiful. So I was like, what is that? I was like, pretty thing. What is this? And I was really drawn to, because she first starts off like, I'm not a doctor, and this is not going to be a medical, but this is not going to be a book in terms of a medical take on anxiety, but it's all the things that I've done and the insight that I've received, and also from other people. And And I bought that book probably like a year and a bit ago, and it's been sitting on my bookshelf. And then since I've given birth to my baby, all of a sudden my anxiety is like so strong. Like I didn't realize it until reading this, but I guess I battled with anxiety quite a bit in my like teens and early 20s, and then through yoga I was able to move through it and kind of work with it. And since giving birth to my babe, I feel like my mind is just going in so many directions all the time. And so I've been feeling really anxious. And so I kind of looked at my bookshelf, saw the pretty book again, and then picked it up.
Resurrected.
Resurrected, came back. And it's been amazing. So I read it when I'm breastfeeding, specifically in the living room, so it's a certain time of day every day that I get to read this book. And what I've been appreciating about it is she's writing it almost in bullet form, where it's not a story, it's numbered. So every paragraph or every couple paragraphs is like a different insight. So she kind of moves, it's not moving in chronological order of her life. She's just being like, number one, here's an insight, and then she writes like stuff in the sidebar to be like, check this out, or like
hot tip.
Yeah, hot tip, or like she has like irony number 7, cruel irony number 8, and so I've really been appreciating reading it because it's reminding me that anxiety is something that a lot of us work with. And one of the where she comes up with the title, I just got into it, I'm like halfway through the book, is there was a Japanese either an author or an article that she read on anxiety, and it first said, first make the beast beautiful. So instead of anxiety being this thing that is pulling you down or wreaking havoc on your life, which it can do, it also can create a lot of insight. And if you work with it properly, then you can essentially, people who are usually very anxious are very sensitive people. So working with that sensitivity a lot of artists actually have anxiety. It's like working with that sensitivity in a way that allows you to feel things more without it overpowering you, which I thought was like such a beautiful concept. And I feel that way about the practice in general, in terms of like what it's given me in my own like emotional landscape, is that a lot of my intense emotions used to be beasts that would take over, and I'd be on the back of the beast would be running through my life, and I'd be watching, the bull in the china shop kind of doing its thing, and then I would get up and try to like sweep up the glass from the bull after it left. But instead, like working with the beast so that together you move through whatever it is that you're moving through. That was like also a long answer, but
I love this because both of you are talking about pretty intense concepts, anxiety and death, but through someone else's story, you found solace in like listening to someone else's story, and not necessarily it being a doctrine or a prescription or like this is the way you should do something. It's just someone presenting, this is my experience, and you're relating to it, which that relates to the throat chakra and
totally.
How we
and
share who we are.
expression.
Totally.
Yeah, and how through the expression and why it's important for us to express is because then it actually builds intimacy with the people around you.
Community.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that it does. And it also, the biggest thing, and this is what this woman was writing about, is like, especially with anxiety, is that the more that you read about other people being anxious, it actually makes you less anxious because you realize that it normalizes the anxiety.
Me. Yeah, it's not just me who feels this way.
Yeah.
I say that we're all bozos on this bus.
We are.
We're all
anxious bozos.
Anxious bozos on this bus. It also reminds me of C.S. Lewis, and Anthony Hopkins did this really beautiful movie called Shadowlands on the life of C.S. Lewis. And one of the things, he was a English author.
C.S. Lewis was.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis. He did the Narnia Chronicles and so on. That's for the kids, and he did a lot of other things as well. But he was a very interesting individual because he converted to Catholicism. This was a whole a movement went on in England in the 20s and 30s. Evelyn Waugh was another English author who converted to Catholicism. But one of the things that Lewis says, especially in Shadowlands, is we read so that we recognize that we're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so storytelling gives us that sense that we're not alone. And mythology gives us the sense that universally men, we all share in some form, all of us, every society has shared anxiety of one form or another.
Yeah.
Fear is another, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. What I'm thinking also about about the throat is sound.
Yeah.
And that we make our own sound, and that we get in touch with our sound. And it's so important to have that ability to center yourself through sound. Right.
I'm smiling because yesterday is the first day that Carmen, my baby, while breastfeeding, has started humming while she's eating.
Oh my god!
And and it sounds like she's almost having a conversation. And
with you?
No, because she's looking off into the distance. She's not looking at me, but she's.
It's just coming out of her
Yeah,
spontaneously.
she's playing. So it's just funny that you're like connecting to your own sound. I'm like, Carmen is doing that right now. She is figuring out what her sound is, which is so interesting.
Can I bring something up? It's really interesting in
Yes.
terms of that. And they were wondering where language comes from. Many people are saying, what's the origin of language? What's it singing and so on. Michael Palin did a really interesting program on South India. And he went to this one place where they do these chants, and it's not written down. It's an oral tradition, because most of us come from an oral. Originally from oral traditions.
Yeah.
Literacy is a recent invention in terms of our species, and so we're saying, where does sound? And they didn't know where the sound comes from. They eventually traced it back, and it comes to bird song. So one of the notions that we have is that we come from natural sounds. We made natural sounds in the beginning, just like little Carmen did, But to imagine that we are really twittering birds is such an interesting notion.
I love it.
Isn't it something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Riffing off that,
yes.
What is a sound that you feel reassured by? Like, what are sounds that you like that help to ground or inspire? What is a sound you like being in? It could be a song, it could be an animal.
Great question.
Maybe it's Carmen singing.
Yeah, no. Why I'm smiling also is because since Carmen's come into our life, we have a white noise machine that's constantly going while she's sleeping. So I feel like what's been happening in my life is the sound of a very intense
static.
fan. Yeah, it's a white noise machine that happens about 12 hours every day at my house.
But is that like the reassuring thing you want to pick right now?
The roar.
I know. I was like, it's what has become normal in my life. I don't know. What would you say would be your first?
The first thing, I'm in a sort of a humorous mood today. When I photograph, when I'm doing weddings and things like that, and I want people to come together, because they're all, people are talking about this, that, and they say, let's focus, we're going to take a photograph. And nobody's quite interested because they want to do other things. I say, look, this is what we do. We make one sound, okay? In the native tradition, when you want to say something's really good, you say, ho! And so everybody, I want to go on 3. 1, 2, 3, ho! And all of a sudden, after the third ho, everybody's laughing, everybody's focused, and we're all there.
Yes.
And so ho is my favorite sound.
I love that. It's like in yoga after chanting, when you can feel the room, something's broken in the room when you start with mantra.
Yes.
It brings everyone to a center that everyone's in their own head, lost in their thoughts or whatever their day's given them. But when you do mantra, it's a point.
Comes back in.
Yeah.
Focus.
So Clara, back to you. What is a sound that you can appreciate?
I think the sound. The first thing that comes to mind would be Monsoon Point, a song named Monsoon Point by Al Gromer Khan, which is probably about 60 minutes long, and it's essentially just two women making the sound of ah, and they kind of layer it on each other. It's actually something I've either been listening to in my mind or listened to actually calm me, to ground me, and to So I would say that would be my favorite thing right now. I love that. I actually practiced for the first time in ages maybe a week ago, and just listened to that the whole time.
Yeah, 60 minutes, you'd really land in
get
the rhythm of it.
super high. It's awesome. I'm really into it. What's your favorite sound, Steph, right now?
This isn't a pleasant sound, but it's more the context that it was in that was just great. So I went sailing for 7 days, And one of the spots we anchored, there were these seals sitting on the rock that would bitch at each other for the best spot in the sun. So all night, totally. And the first night I'm like, what is going on over there? And Greg, my partner's like, well, seals are very aggressive and they want the best spot on that rock. So all day and night, these seals barking. Yeah. But it's wonderful because
what does it sound like? The bark.
You're laying there like, oh, okay. It's like they're bitching at each other. Yeah. It's so funny. But that was the only sound. So it's like you're right here in nature and in their element. And that was all. And I got used to it. And it was like this little comedy.
What does it do for you? What does those sounds do for you?
It took me away from the sounds of the city where there's sirens and people, language, the talking, and then I'm landing in someone else's story. It's like birds, but birds I'm used to. The chirping, it's really pretty, but these seals, it's kind of a husky, throaty sound. It's very weird. But it's also funny because they bitch at each other like we do. Like they're like,
move over. I got here first.
Mine.
Yeah, totally, exactly, like the seagulls.
And yes. Birds are probably doing the same thing, but it's prettier. So you're like, oh, the birds are chirping, but who knows what they're saying?
Yes.
So it's funny.
Yes. And then what book have you been loving in the last 6 months to a year that you've read?
Well, the book I'll bring up that I mentioned earlier, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which is a coming-of-age novel. In German, it's called a Bildungsroman. It's my favorite type of book that traces a very young protagonist into adulthood, and they're often unreliable because you're like, where's the truth in this? And it's in New York in the beginning, because you read it, Clara, and a bomb goes off in an art history museum, and his mother dies, and he, in the trauma, steals this picture of a little yellow goldfinch. And then the book Donna Tartt does such a great job of weaving in art history with this young boy's life and how he moves across the states. And then he's also dealing with this guilt that's amassed over this photo. Like, where does he put it? He's always hiding it. And then all the different people he comes in to connection with. But the one constant in his life is this little picture of the bird. Yeah, it's my favorite book, worth the read if you can sit with yourself for 1,000+ pages.
It goes on quite a journey. Like, I felt it was a page turner for sure.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about it. I don't think I put it down.
And that kind of bleeds into my next question that I wanted to ask you both is, what is your favorite way of being in a story? So do you like movies, video, or TV shows, reading, podcasts, like talking to people and hearing their stories? What is a way you like consuming media? Instagram? There's another way of...
That's a great question. I would say for me, definitely reading.
Why?
I love reading fiction, and I have from a very young age. I feel like the gift that my dad gave me the most when I was little was always books, is because they're giving you an outline. The author is giving you an outline, but you don't really know what these people look like or where they are or what's going on. So you get to create this whole entire story inside. You have I feel like you have the skeleton, but then the rest the rest of it is yours to create, and I love that. Yeah. I love I'm having a vision of reading. I used to love to read on Sunday mornings in bed when I lived by myself a long time ago, and I read for hours.
Those were the days.
I know. It was a different life. I love my life now, but I used to wake up and read in bed for 3 or 4 hours and then take a nap and then read a little bit more. It used to be one of my favorite things, and so I love to read for a couple hours and then close the book and kind of close my eyes and ruminate or be lost in that story. I love that.
Yeah.
Or being, I travel. Yeah, exactly. When I travel and be on a boat, that was 3 words in one. Like a bus or a train or a boat, and reading so that you're somewhere else, but it kind of romanticizes where you are as well. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be
your magic carpet.
Yeah, it would be my magic carpet. Exactly. Zoom, zoom. And you, Shiv?
When you were asking the question, I thought I come from an oral tradition in India. So I literacy is a new thing, as I mentioned earlier. It's a new and I had at least my sister Jennifer had an ayah, which is a nanny, and she was a grandmother, came from a village. This is in the middle of nowhere because my father was an engineer and he was shunted off because he wasn't interested, but his job was to fix accidents that occurred on the railway. So these accidents would occur and it would take him 6 months to fix. So we were in the middle of nowhere, and we had this ayah who was, at that time, in India, you could walk into a village and it was like thousands of years ago because there was no modernity there. Anyhow, this woman carried within her the Indian tradition, and she spoke Hindi. And I understood Hindi after a while, and she would tell us these stories in the night. And the Indian language it's a guttural language. And I was told when I spoke Hindi in the cities, I was speaking an archaic Hindi that I'd learned in the countryside. So there was this archaic sense of the universe, and there were 2 times I remember when she would speak, it was though the earth itself was speaking, and the earth opened up. So my sense of orality has to do with primordial notions of what it means to be here and what it means to be human. So I immediately enter into the imaginative realm when I hear people speaking. It immediately kicks me in. I'm not a visual person. I didn't like reading. Because reading is an abstraction. Whereas the breath is involved, as you know, in chanting, is involved with the human and the human rhythms and so on. And the breath and the sound are interconnected. And I just want to go back to what you were saying about the goldfinch, because once again we go back to the birds. Yeah. You know, and it's so interesting that he has this goldfinch, which they are singers. Goldfinches are wonderful singers. So you have this sense of the song of the heart. I feel mythology is the song of the soul, okay, of human beings. So that's what interests me, when the soul sings, when the soul speaks. You know, like when I would hear the earth itself speaking in Hindi.
I love that.
Steph, how about you?
Yeah.
I really love reading and listening to people tell their stories. That's why I love asking questions, is just hearing people, the way they share themselves is always very interesting to me, like the body language and the vocabulary. Something I read recently, which is why I've never liked watching TV. One of the tactics used in media is you want to create characters that are more static for the audience, the consumer, to attach to. It's why the characters in Friends, for 13 seasons, their personalities don't change, because you build a very intimate relationship to, like, Rachel's always Rachel. All of the dynamic parts of the show happen with their parents or their partners, the side characters. In music and books, you usually see the protagonist, or, there's a breakup or the person shifts, and that's life. That's like the song of the goldfinch. The cycles of the Om we started talking about is there's a metamorphosis. But TV doesn't do that because they want to build these everlasting series so they can keep selling the... Not all the time, I'm generalizing, but it was a... It was a character...
There's a static quality to it.
Yeah, and there's 2 different characters you create for your reader, your audience. And in TV, they make the characters more fixed for the longevity. Whereas with a book, this is generalizing. You read the book, you put it down, and then you usually, the interesting part is that there's a transformation in the character.
And just to kind of riff on that, is that I remember when that changed in TV. That's why I was like, oh. Okay. So 6 Feet Under is the first show. Yeah, pre your time.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
No, 6 Feet Under was the first show. It was on HBO. That was a series that the characters by the 6th season, which was the last season, they'd all really changed. And then right after that came The Sopranos. And both those TV shows changed a lot of TV. You definitely still have the sitcoms where everybody stays in character as they are. There's no catharsis or a cathartic moment or a change. But then out of it, because I think what had happened is a lot of actually screenwriters from movies had actually moved to TV, and with that shifted the way that they were character building.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's just cool that you bring that up, because I was like, oh, I remember when TV changed. Which was so, it was...
And it depends on, it's your intention, but it depends on what you're trying to create. And usually with books, it's a capsule moment, and then you put it down, but that's not how social media and, like, these series are created. You see all these different things made out of one character. They're an icon, they're a brand. So it's just different ways of consuming media.
So what does that tell you about audiences?
I think people want something that they can rely on, that's consistent, that they can come and take refuge in. And
because their lives
are not like that. Our lives are not, it's the it's this, I'm coming back to that cycling process, and that's exhausting sometimes.
Yes, and so that's how they seek refuge.
I wanted to ask you both, in the last portion of this, something that makes your heart sing. So speaking in terms of expressing yourself, what you do that really gives you that sense of buoyancy, and how you share it. So this is several parts of this question. And then maybe in a time where you haven't felt that you were being heard or received in how you were expressing yourself, because that's the imbalance of the throat chakra. When we have a blockage, we don't know how to express ourselves. And then how those two sides work. So when you feel you are imbalance, and you're expressing yourself, and when you feel like there's a blockage.
Right, and then there's two parts to the shadow side. So I feel like we should just add to that is like, it's either blocked or it's too open. So when it's blocked, you can't. You can't speak. And then the other side of that is that you overshare.
Yeah.
So it goes one of two ways. So I feel like we should open it that.
Yeah.
I'd love to shift the question if that's okay.
Great.
Where the other side is, when can you think of a time that you were either, it was too much. It was like you were not holding back anything, or when you couldn't share. So, and I'd love us all to answer this question.
Yeah.
Do you want to start, Shiv, or do you? I know I had to chew on that. I was like,
because I recognize when I was in boarding school, we were not allowed to speak, and I carry that with me. And what I've done is I've learned to sing, and I'm thinking of people who stutter. People who stutter can sing, and they don't stutter when they're singing. It's kind of interesting. And what I do instead of singing, I do images. And what really gets me going is how light operates, and how everything is dependent, how life is dependent on light. And so I express myself not through my throat chakra, but through my, through the vision, through light. And I recognize that, and I recognize, it's one of the things I recognize when my part of my shadow now is my throat is caught. It's still caught. And I'm working on that.
And so how do you work on that?
First of all, I massage myself over here.
In your throat?
And exactly over here, massage it.
Yeah.
And be conscious of wanting to express myself and share my truth. Because I feel that when I have shared my truth, it has been ignored, or it has been ridiculed. And so that's what I live with. So I hope I've answered some of those questions.
Totally.
I'm going to riff on that and then go to the part when I feel imbalance. The nightmare that I have had most of my life is that people can't hear me, that I'm trying to speak and it doesn't come out. And I'm trying to scream or yell for help, and it doesn't come out. Wow. So that's one that shows up. And then on within that same vein, when I have like a yoga work mare, as I like to call them. So work mare is a nightmare that happens at work. I used to have I still can get restaurant work mares. I haven't worked in restaurants in over a decade, but I can still have those ones. So my work mare is all about walking into the yoga studio and nobody's listening to me. People are on their cell phones. People are talking really loudly. And anytime I speak, nobody hears me. Like no matter how loud I speak, they just keep doing what they're doing. And so in that way, it shows up in my dreams that I'm not heard. And so kind of just riffing off of what Shiv was saying in terms of not being able to be understood or heard is, I think, like a common theme in my life. Mm-hmm. Steph, how about you?
So mine is more around gossip. I have 3 younger sisters, and growing up, we all would talk to each other, talk about each other. It was just normalized. And in high school, I remember a girlfriend telling me that I gossiped, and I was shocked because I didn't think that I was. I talked about Amanda to Rebe and Rebe to Amanda. Those are my sisters, and moving through adolescence, didn't realize that it was harmful and unnecessary. And then within the last year, I shared information with a friend thinking that it would benefit her if something else somebody had said. Like I thought I was doing a good thing by being like, oh, this is something that someone said about you. Maybe you should like not have them in your life. But that isn't my place. Like that to me is what you were saying about too much in this chakra. Like none of my business. I didn't need to put myself in that place. That is a form of gossip. And I felt bad afterwards. I didn't need to insert myself in that position. So, and I've noticed within myself, like these moments when, is what you're saying necessary? What will it do the other person for the other person? And now I don't say anything at all. I think it's better that if things are meant to be known, they will appear to the person in question. And yeah.
And then on the light side of that is like, when do you feel?
Well, when I'm writing, the talking to and with and about other people is all a form of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And so, but for me, it's like keep that in the books. Go and meet these people who are weird and wonderful, and then write about them and take little bites of their personality and create characters you can talk to everyone about, instead of bringing it into my reality with people where feelings get hurt.
Yeah, and not necessarily, or if you need to share something, share it with the person directly is always like a good line of thinking. So we leave it at this. I think it's a perfect place to end the show. And so bringing it back to you, my friends, the listeners, in terms of your relationship to your own throat chakra, is how do you express your truth, or how do you express what is true and authentic for you in that moment? And then another question is what lights you up in terms of expression? That was another one that Steph brought up. Mm-hmm. And so, how do you, and then what is your relationship to sound? What is your sound? I loved that question. Yeah. What is your sound? What is it that when you hear it makes your heart sing? No?
Yeah.
Raindrops on tin roofs.
Oh, that's a good one.
So good.
That's my favorite one to sleep to.
Sound of rain.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Sound of
Trying
rain.
to talk, though, over that rain has been really intense in my life. I don't know, depending on how loud the rain is, I've definitely had to be like, I'm going to the bathroom, or, whatever it is. Like, it becomes so loud.
All that rain.
Yeah, all that rain. Exactly. Okay, so
right,
on that note,
Yeah.
thank you so much for
you.
joining us this afternoon, Shiv. Always a pleasure to have you. And Steph, thank you so much for all the amazing questions. Mm-hmm. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye. Ho!
Hey!
So good.
Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Today's podcast was brought to you by the Practice with Clara app. That's mine. I've created almost 100 yoga classes for you to do at home or on the go. And they're available to you on your favorite device, including mobile, desktop, and TV. These classes include vinyasa, slow flow, hatha, restorative, yin, mantra, meditation. I also just had a baby, so I created prenatal yoga for all 4 trimesters. So head over to clararobertsoss.com/join to learn more. Or search for the Practice with Clara app at your favorite app store. There's a 7-day free trial, so no commitment. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We've got lots of good stuff in store for you. Until next time, namaste.